Hey everybody, it is spring as I'm recording this in the Northern Hemisphere, and the weather's starting to actually reflect that, finally. Despite this, at this time of year we usually start thinking about traveling. And with us artists, that also means that we start thinking about how to make art when we're traveling. I thought I would go through some things that might help you out with that goal, including tools, mediums, and some ideas that might make your experience a little bit better. So let's talk making art on the road. This is Mark, and this is We Talk Art. Making art while traveling presents the artist with even more challenges than it takes to make unique, compelling, and amazing art. Space, weight, durability, simplicity, time, convenience, and yes, comfort are all factors. Travel can sometimes present some unanticipated limitations. It is always harder, at least for me, than I imagined to actually make art while I travel. This is especially difficult if you're traveling with non-artists or in a group of non-artists. I can't really cover all the types of art, and I know there are some very tenacious artists out there that do some amazing types of art while traveling, yet I'm going to restrict this to drawing, some color options, watercolor, gouache, acrylics, and oils. So that's what we're looking at. Some of this will apply for other things, but we're going to concentrate on that. I thought I would start on the small stuff side, the kind of things that you would put in your grab and go kit, and then we'll move on to the more exotic and larger items, while throwing in some tips that will help make your trip better. Also, be sure to check on the show notes below. I always try to put in links to the products that I talk about. Note that some of these are affiliate links, which means if you do buy off that, the channel will get a little bit of a kickback. I always recommend buying in your local art supply store if you can, but the links are there if you need them. I think that all artists, except for the hardcore studio artists, should have a basic small grab-and-go kit that they can take and make art anywhere. If you ever tried to pack normal art supplies into this kind of kit, you probably have a little bit of an inkling of the challenge of that. I will point out some of the items that might help keep that kit manageable. We're going to start here with drawing in graphite. I know that some artists kind of skip the whole drawing in graphite thing, but I like to sketch, and I even do some final works with graphite. Over the years, I've cycled through a range of tools. I've come back around to doing a lot of my drawing, especially while traveling, with mechanical pencils, although they have some pros and cons. One of the positive sides, they are very convenient and they don't require a sharpener or a knife and the related mess that comes with those devices. As a result, I feel like you can save some space with mechanical pencils as long as you work within their limits. The biggest limits with mechanical pencils are the small size of the lead, which some like me actually like that, and the limit of the range of hardnesses, which gets more limiting with the smaller size the leads are. When I draw in graphite, I usually work in a range of 4H to 6B. More recently, I've added one of those really cool Faber-Castell matte pencils that goes all the way to a 14B, and this guy is pretty sweet. But unfortunately, this pencil is only made in the traditional wood pencil, which means that you need a sharper. As a result, it doesn't always make the cut. My grab and go kit only has 2 mechanical pencils in it. Now, this one is my longer term grab and go kit. It's where I take on longer trips, so it has a lot of mechanical pencils. But normally I carry 2, and usually it's between a 2H, 3H, and a 4B. And usually in the 0.5 size. So this is the 0.5 in the Graph Gear 1000, which we'll talk about. In the 0.5 size, I find that if you go too much harder than that 2H, you're going to damage your paper. And if you go too much softer than the 4B or 3B, you're going to find that you're having to click the lead because you're going to eat up that 0.5 millimeters of a soft lead just too fast. What is cool is because of the small size of the leads, you actually get more variation of darkness from less variation of pressure applied to the pencil, which is cool because it makes it that you don't need as many grades of graphite. That's why it can get away with 2. You can get a really wide range of gradations from that. These are a bit pricey, but I rarely break leads except for the .03 size, which does break occasionally. They feel really good in the hand, and the lead advance works really good. And then the nice thing is it has a retractable lead holder so that you don't stab yourself when you're carrying it around. You just use the clip here, and that retracts the leads into the pencil. So that's a real cool design. With that said, I'm sure any of the quality mechanical pencils out there will do well. Another option you might consider is going to be a 2mm lead holder. Now this is going to hold a much larger lead, so if you're used to drawing with larger leads, or you like to extend the leads out a ways so that you can hold the pencil overhand, these make a really good option for that. So you can hold those in an overhand kind of format if you wish, like this, which some artists like to do. The only problem with these is you're going to need some kind of sharpener. Now, a lot of these, including the Pacific Arc brand, has a sharpener in the cap on the back. So you can actually pull this off and then sharpen this end like this. And you don't need a sharpener, but the more traditional sharpener for these is going to be this kind of sharpener, where the pencil goes in and spins around. And this is a Staedtler version. Some other companies make these. They make a really sharp tip to your pencil, weapon sharp, so you have to be a little careful of it, and it has a little place to clean the lead off. So this is a real cool thing, but you still have the added space of this and the added potential mess of the lead that comes out. Even if you use the end cap here, that can cause a little bit of a mess. So use it if you aren't opposed to that. I have more information about these pencils in Graphite in a video that I did a while back, and you can link to it there, or I'll put it in the show notes below so you can hit it after this whole video. The other thing that I think is really important to have into this kit is going to be erasers. And I tend to like the mechanical erasers also, because I think they're convenient and they're kind of nice and they fit into a small space. There's a variety of them. This is the Tombow Mono Zero eraser, and that has a really small tip, which is nice. I also like the General Facet mechanical eraser. Works really good. Although Pentel makes a very similar one. It's called the Click, C-L-I-C, and then they have the Click Pro, which is a smaller version of this. So all of these are pretty nice. This one has a nice mechanism for doing it. This kind of works more like the mechanical pencil. You just kind of extend them that way with the button at the back. So mechanical erasers, I think, are a good option. Remember that these erasers aren't just for erasing mistakes. They're actually a drawing tool. And so the precision you get from these smaller erasers is going to allow you to do more precise drawing. I think all around these tend to be a better drawing tool, even for erasing mistakes, than the classic rectangular eraser, which the Staedtler plastic eraser, these things are kind of a classic and they do a really good job and they're great for bigger areas. But when I'm traveling, I just kind of side with these guys here. I'm also a big fan of pen and ink when I'm traveling. My go-to pen is usually a fountain pen. Yet I know that these are often a love them, hate them kind of drawing device. They also can present some additional challenges over disposable fine liner pens. So while traveling, you need to really consider the advantages and the disadvantages of using these. What I like about fountain pens is that you can get fountain pens that have flexible nibs. This allows either a small amount or fairly large amount of line variation depending on the pen. This can mean that you need less pens because of the line variation. I usually take one or two of these, unless I'm packing really small, then I just carry one. But the other thing about that line variation is you get a much more expressive line because you can actually change the lines while you're drawing. So they tend to be a really nice drawing device, but they take some practice, and I know some people don't like them, and some people don't like them for the having to fill them and do all the things. So the disposable pen for some people is the way to go. The other advantage of the fountain pen is you get to choose your ink, not necessarily have to take whatever comes in the pen. This includes some waterproof fountain pen ink, such as the Platinum Carbon Black waterproof fountain pen ink. Despite all of this, I will sometimes use the disposable fine liners, and traveling is sometimes one of those cases. The risk with the fountain pens is they generally can be prone to leaking, especially when atmospheric pressure changes, such as being in an airplane or traveling over mountains. This is where disposable fine liners, ballpoints, markers, these types of pen may be the safe bet. For me, when I'm on a road trip, I might take a classic fountain pen. This is a Safari All-Star. If I'm doing air travel, I'll probably leave this behind, and I'll leave my other fountain pens behind. And if I'm going to take a fountain pen, I'll probably take one of these Platinum Preppies or two of them. These are very inexpensive, less than $10 fountain pens. They take cartridges. You can even put a converter in it, but the converters are sometimes as much as the pen is. But the advantage of these is they do take the platinum carbon black ink in a cartridge, so that's a waterproof ink, and that makes these be pretty good. They have a really small amount of variation to the tip, which works for me, and I usually take two of them, a small one, which is the 02 and the 05. It gives me a fair amount of line variation. So those work for me well. If I am going to go with some other pens, such as disposable pens, the first kind of pen I will often go with is going to be a Fude nib pen, and Faber-Castell makes their line of Fude pit pens, which looks kind of like that, and Tombow makes a line of them. And both of these, both the Tombow and the Faber-Castell, have a version of a hard and medium or hard and soft nibs. These are a little hard to tell, but in the part number you'll see that it will be BH or BS for hard and soft. And I usually have both of them. You can buy them separately, but they do really good. But of course, the classic in all of this is going to be the fine liner, which the most popular version is going to be the Micron, although Pentel makes a really good line of the point liners, and Eddington makes some, and Derwent makes some, and Faber-Castell makes some. So there's a lot of options when you come to fine liners. You just kind of find the ones that are either available to you or you like. So when I do take a fine liner, what I usually will do is take two pens, and that might be an 05, which is really, really small, or a 1, which is still small. So that would be kind of on the extra fine side. And then on the larger size, I might take a 5 or an 8. And Microns make these different. So it's 005 or an 01, and then an 05 and an 08 for the larger size. So I won't take all 4 of these. I'll generally take just 2 of these. And then I include a brush pen because these are just a lot of fun. So that gives you very large areas that you can fill in and are really nice. I do enjoy those. Going back to the fountain pens, I did do a video a little while ago on fountain pens. I'll link it here and also put that in the show notes if you want to take a deep dive into those. One other option to get even more out of your limited kit of graphite and or fountain pens, or pens for that matter, is to go with water-soluble versions of these. Many fountain pen inks are not waterproof, and you can get a water-soluble graphite, such as this Art Graph, which is a water-soluble graphite. Faber-Castell makes some water-soluble graphite, and I believe Koh-i-Noor makes some water-soluble graphite. So by combining these with a water pen, which we're going to talk about in a few seconds, so either of these combinations can be a ton of fun and expand your sketching, because you can then pull that ink or graphite using the water into something that looks a little bit more like a painting. So it's a fun way to get a lot out of a very small kit. There is a huge array of other tools that are possible, yet many of these are either going to be a little bit messy or require additional tools or supplies. If you're bold enough, you could consider charcoal, carbon pencils, pastels, powders, variety of other kinds of pens. Most of these are pretty much require a spray fix if you're going to use them in a sketchbook. And as I said, it comes with a mess and might make some inconvenience when you're traveling. So you'll have to consider those options. So now we can talk about color. When I travel, I like to have at least one color option. I have always loved the combination of pen and ink and watercolor. I feel like the combination works really well for travel journals and gives you the kind of that urban sketching kind of look. A small watercolor set and a few water brushes can allow you to take advantage of a really small space to get a lot of color, and you can really get some great results from this set, even when you have limited time or limited colors. So what are these water brushes I keep talking about? So as I showed you, they're basically a brush that has water in the handle, and you can either squeeze them or squeeze a button to get water to come out into an inexpensive nylon brush. The nice thing about them is they're rugged. You don't need a big thing of water, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and you can get several of these. Companies like Pentel, Caran d'Ache, Derwent, and Royal Brush all make a variety of brush pens that you can use. Another secret is you actually can put ink in these, which is a lot of fun. Also, not a good travel option though. So the nice thing about these is it allows you to do a variety of things that would normally require you to carry water, but just carry these. Now, I've taken these on a plane full, and I've gotten through security and everything. If you're a little concerned about that, you can always empty them out, go through security and fill them in the airport, and then you can have a water brush on the plane, which is a good option. It should be noted, if you do take these on the plane, the atmospheric pressure could want the water to come out fairly rapidly. You can sometimes take the cap off to equalize it in the plane, but it usually goes away fairly rapidly. These brush pens do take a little bit to get used to, but once you do kind of perfect them, they really are nice. They're not going to replace your Kolinsky Sable watercolor brush, okay? But they work in a pinch, and that really is when you're traveling. If you'd rather have a real brush, there are a few takes on that for traveling also. I feel like most of the travel brushes that are out there are directed toward watercolors or gouache painters, but there are some for acrylics and oils also. Raphael makes a line of watercolor brushes that are just really small. They just have small handles, and so they fit into small places, and these are a nice option. Raphael makes a really good brush, and so these will work well for that. So this is definitely one option there. Another option is you can just cut the end off of a normal brush and make it whatever size you want to fit into whatever space you want. And you can get the quality brush, your favorite one, if you're willing to cut those off. Usually it requires a saw, but you might be able to do that with a knife. But what's really the favorite for a lot of artists when traveling is a travel brush. These travel brushes have a handle on them that comes off and allows you to put the brush into them, into the handle, so that it protects it during traveling. Has a little hole there so the moisture can escape, and it also allows you to push it on. There's two different takes on this. This is more the traditional one, and then Da Vinci has their system, which looks a little bit more like this, and it allows you to unscrew it and then screw it back in. Different people have their favorites. The Da Vinci handle is a little bit fatter. Some people like it, some people don't. You can see this one, the Da Vinci has a nice quill. So there's a large variety of different types of brushes that fit in here, and you get high quality synthetics, and there's even natural hair versions of these, including the silver brush. Like this one, this is a black velvet, which is a very nice brush. And it has that traditional thing too. So these are a really great option when you're traveling, and you might consider them. They're a little bit on the pricier side, but they're a great brush and they'll last you a long time. Just to review some of the companies that I'm aware of who make these travel brushes is Da Vinci. I showed you in a Skoda. Raphael actually has some. Silverbrush sells them, and Princeton sells them. Both their Aqua Elite and Neptune lines at least are in that. And then if you're painting oil acrylics, I know that Princeton also has some brushes that are more designed for the oil acrylics and heavy body that are also travel brushes. So there's options for all of those. They do fit in a small space, allow you to have a whole assortment of brushes in a nice little small space, and it's protected as you travel. So for watercolors, you do have a few options, but I would always recommend limiting those options to pan sets. You can buy a 6, 12, 18, 24, even larger color sets of pan watercolors from a lot of popular paint companies, including Winsor Newton and Daniel Smith. Or buy one of a handful of super small watercolor palettes empty and then fill it with your favorite paint. You just put it in a pan, a little toothpick can help you get it all the way filled in, and then it usually will dry overnight and make a really nice pan. Also, you can fill these with gouache if that is more your gig. So here's some good options for watercolor. Winsor & Newton puts their student grade Cotmans and their well-known Winsor & Newton Pro watercolors into some nice travel sets like this one. Folds down into be a pretty small set like that. Also, Daniel Smith, Sennelier, Golden Core can all be found in a variety of pre-filled sets that you can buy. Artist Toolkits makes some really nice portable palettes that go down to be super small. And they go all the way up to a very large palette like this. This is a really cool set in that the pans are magneted in, so they're steel and the bottom of the palette has a magnet and they can go in. This allows you to actually rearrange this palette or change it up for different trips. So if you're traveling to the ocean one time, you can get an ocean palette going. If you're traveling to the mountains, you might have a forest palette. And if you're going to the desert, you can have a desert palette. And you can change these out. So you can buy these tins full with these little pans, or you can buy the pans separate and fill it any way you want. They also have a big mixing area, and then you can get mixing trays, so you can configure this in a lot of different ways. And the largest one they make is actually still really quite small. They also have a medium-sized one that looks like this. So Artist Toolkit has a nice option. Another good option is going to be Portable Painter. And they have a small little 6-color set like this that folds down into this little box. Just comes apart like this, goes into that, and this goes on the top, and you get a small little thing like that. So this is 6-color, and then they have their larger 12-color set that has these 2 water containers on the side, and this one also closes up really small, goes like this, and then these come off, go onto the side, and then this little rail can go and hold it together. So this is a really nice portable set too. When it's extended with the water things on the side, it actually can slide over your knee and stay up when you don't even have a table or something to put it on. It's a pretty cool option. Portable Painters has also come out with some upgrade kits for these that have smaller palette sizes, so you can actually get more colors into both of these sets. And then I should mention Etcher Labs. I have a few of their other things here we'll be talking about. They make the 2 of these little porcelain palettes. I only have 1 of them. It ends up having 2 little things that fit into this nice little tray. It's kind of designed to have color in one and mixing in the other. And then it goes back really small, even has a card so you can make a little bit of a palette with it. And it slides into this little carrying device here. So this is a really cool option. And then finally, I actually make my own palette that I sell at my old store, Nevada Fine Arts. And it goes into an Altoids tin, opens up like this, has 2 little areas that you can do mixing with. It holds 18 colors, and you can even store some brushes in it if you cut off the ends like I talked about earlier. And then the top can either hold paper, or you can hold your palette in there, swatches, so you can see what colors you have. So there's a lot of options for travel palettes, and they go far beyond this. You can go to your local art supply store and probably find a lot of these different options out there. Having a nice 12-color palette with some mixing area and a water brush or 2 can make the perfect color option for your art on the road. These can easily be used in coach on a plane with those small little trays. Another thing to be aware of is I did make a video I'll link up here about watercolor that might help get you started in watercolor if you're not a watercolor artist. Now, if you're not going with the water brush option and going with a traditional brush, either one of these travel brushes or something like that, you're going to have to carry water. Now, don't judge me, but I actually find a drinking flask to be a really perfect size. It holds a fair amount of water. It's the right size for it. You will want to fill this after you get through security at the airport. You just do it in a fountain, and then you'll have water to do whatever you need with. If you have the portable palette, you can fill these little side compartments with it. You can also use it to fill your water brushes or other things like that. So this is a good option. And the final thing that you're going to need if you're going to be traveling with a watercolor set, especially a pan set, is you're going to want some kind of spray bottle. that will allow you to spritz and get your paints activated. The Holbein makes a nice one. Again, this is probably something you're going to want to fill after you get through security, but also there's some really micro ones. This is a Artist Toolkit little micro one, that a little spray bottle. Now, I'll warn you, they do not last too terribly long. You spray this water out pretty quick, but they are really small. A Ranger makes a little bit larger one, so these are great options for just getting you through a plane trip or something like that, so you can spritz your colors. You probably could even take these through security full. There's not that much water in them. Another color option that is very effective and can be included in a relatively small kit would be watercolor pencils. Despite their name, these are not true watercolors, but they are a ton of fun and can be a great option providing color on the go. They are also great for artists that don't do watercolors. Think of them as kind of watercolor light. These are basically a water-soluble color pencil. They can be used kind of like a color pencil, but you can then pull them with a wet brush or a brush pen. As with watercolors, these come in a wide range of qualities. I have found that the Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer watercolor pencils are really good. They work really well for me, but there's other manufacturers such as Derwent, Prismacolor, Caran d'Ache that also make some really good watercolor pencils. The challenge is going to be restricting it so you can fit it into a small bag. Just keep in mind that you can do a lot with 6 colors. So it's a good option. You don't need all of these. I think the whole Faber-Castell set is 72 colors, but they may have over 100 now. They keep adding colors to it, but I have quite a few. This is a fairly large set, but again, 6 colors, you can do a lot. Also, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention Inktense. Derwent Inktense are an option that's very similar to both watercolors and watercolor pencils. They come in a large range of colors. The difference between these and watercolors or watercolor pencils is that after you wet them and put them on paper, they tend to become waterproof. They don't pull up again. This can vary depending on how much pigment, water, and how hard you try and what paper you put them on, but generally they stay down really well. One reason I like Inktense is that they work really well when you put pen and ink over the top of them, which isn't always true of watercolors. I did do a video on Inktense. I'll put it up here and then also in the show notes if you want to check that out after. They come in 3 different formats. They come in pencils, they come in a pan set that goes to larger numbers of colors if you wish, and they also have blocks, which are kind of fun. Probably not so much for travel. I think if I was going to travel, I'd probably take the pan set instead of watercolors. It depends on what you're going with, although the pencils are very handy and easy, and if you don't have a skill set with a brush necessarily, the pencils work really well, and they can be used kind of like color pencils. And that leads us into another option, which is color pencils. Now, personally, I think color pencils are kind of like an art form to themselves. And as a result, I don't use them a ton, but you can't deny they're a great travel option. They're really easy color. You can use them like a pencil, put your color down, and you don't need water. So if you're game on that, these work really well. Again, I'm using the Faber-Castell Polychromas, really good pencil. Now, color pencils come in different flavors. They come in wax base and oil base. The Polychromas are an oil base. There's an ongoing feud, which is better. Some people like the wax base, such as the Prismacolor, and others like the oil base, like the Polychromas. It mainly is a difference in how they blend and are applied, what kind of papers they go on, so forth. Test them if you want. Again, you can still get by with 6 colors if you need to. So it is a good option if you want to throw these in, especially if you're comfortable in coloring with color pencils as your color option. So while I have this out, you'll notice I've been bringing out products in different kinds of formats and different bags and so forth. And so picking a good bag to carry your products in is a good thing. When you're dealing with pencils and pens and such, there's a variety of pencil cases that are out there, and they're by a few different companies. Speedball makes these, and then these roll-ups, which I like a lot. Not that, but the roll-ups. Derwent makes a nice roll-up like this one. and they generally hold, 20 to 30 pencils depending on the one you get. They roll up to be very small, and they're a really good option. Some of them, like the Speedball one, the roll up, it has a pocket at the end that you can put sharpeners and erasers and so forth in. So some option to keep your pencils under control so they don't roll off your table and roll down the aisle in the airplane is kind of handy. These also will keep your leads from breaking and keep them somewhat safe. So coming up with some option for taking care of your pencils and pens are a really good thing. And this kind of pulls us up against color pens. I'm not a huge fan of taking color pens with me when I travel because they tend to be a little bit larger. They tend to be a little bit more specialized. But there are a large number of color pens out there with different characteristics. And you can get away with just taking a couple colors. Now I have some odd ones here by Faber-Castell, but if you packed a red and a blue and a yellow, some primaries, sometimes you can just drop a little bit of color into a drawing and get some really nice effects. So, a handful of color pencils may be the way you want to go. Again, I generally don't. One thing that I have done in the past is that I have a set of grayscale microns, which is a fine liner, but they're in a grayscale, and they sell this kit together this way with all these different grayscale levels in their various sizes. And these can be a good option for doing some grayscale work. Not quite color, but it works well for me at times. So there's even more color options that we are going to still talk about. So with this, we're going to talk about acrylics and oils, both of which are possible when you travel. We're going to talk about this when we talk about pochade boxes, which are basically paint boxes. So that will be in a few minutes. Until then, we're going to talk about art journals and sketchbooks. I find the most convenient place to make art while I'm traveling is in a sketchbook or in an art journal, although many artists are a lot more ambitious than I am. I just did a whole video on sketchbooks that's I'm going to link up here. I'll put it in the show notes below. That might give you some insight into my thoughts about sketchbooks. In a nutshell, if you're intending to do your art in a journal or a sketchbook, I would highly recommend picking one that has a decent paper that will stand up to the type of mediums you're going to bring with you on the trip. If this doesn't include wet mediums like watercolor or pen and ink and things like that, you can go with a nice draw paper, or you might be able to use a high quality sketch paper. This isn't my favorite. I'm just not a fan of sketch paper. I usually recommend a good mixed media paper, but a Bristol paper or a watercolor paper can work too. If you're working in other mediums beyond just watercolor, then I like hot press because you can do pen and ink in it and your color pencils and various things. If you're just doing watercolor, then you can go with the commonly used cold press paper that a lot of watercolors like. If I'm packing a little light, I'll often try to pick a size journal that will fit into whatever bag I'm taking with me. This is the Etcher Field bag. And so a 3x5 sketchbook barely fits into there. So this might be the sketchbook that I will take for something like this. More often, I tend to like a slightly bigger sketchbook. I think my favorite size is probably the 5x8 size, of 5.5x8. There come different sizes, but it's about this size. This is also my favorite sketchbook. If you watch my sketchbook video that I showed a minute ago, it has a great mixed media paper in it. It's 100% cotton, which is really unusual for a mixed media paper. The cover rips off so you can have another color, put stickers on and everything. So this is a great size, but it doesn't fit into all my bags. So it kind of depends on how lean I am trying to go with my work. Another thing is if I am hiking or backpacking, I will often opt for the smaller size, which is about a 3x5 size. These tend to work really well for when I'm either really, really lean or, trying to do work on the go. The larger size, though, for me is actually the better size, and I try to get this into a bag if I can. So another consideration is the binding of the books. For travel journals, if I'm going to make a travel journal, I'll often want to go with a book bound, kind of like this. They make them, larger size. They're different book bindings. But I think they just have a nicer look. And so if you're trying to make a travel journal that you're going to show off as your trip, well, we'll talk about that, but the book bound as well. But you just can't deny the convenience of the wire bound. So a wire bound sketchbook looks something like this. Often they'll have a rigid back cover. And so a couple things that they do really well is that they open and then stay down flat. And then you also can flip them over on themselves, which is really convenient. And because of that solid back, you don't necessarily have to have a solid surface to do these on. So these may be the solution. They're less elegant, less elegant and nice, and may not be quite the presentation you want to show people, but they're definitely going to be more convenient while you're on the road. If you're wanting to do more of a final type work when you're out there on the road, you might want to consider paper in a pad or in a watercolor block. These are going to be more kind of this kind of thing, and they're bound different ways. A watercolor block usually has more sealing around it so that when you get this wet, it will then dry and dry fairly flat. Pads, the paper rips out a little bit more easier, but this can be really great if you're trying to do final works and works you may want to give away or something while you're traveling. So by now you're probably asking yourself, what do I put all this stuff into? And again, if you can, this is a pretty nice little compact setup here. This is the Etcher field bag and a small sketchbook. But if you're more ambitious than that, we're going to cover a variety of options getting into, as I talked about, the paint boxes that we're talking about. I'm going to kind of start this off by looking at some bags that are kind of specialized specifically for travel and making art. If you're going to be just drawing or doing watercolors, one of my favorites is Etcher Labs has their satchel line. This little field bag is part of that line. They come in a variety of different sizes. I think actually 3 or 4 different sizes, of which I only have 2. The smaller field case is kind of designed to hook onto these in different ways, so these could be carried with their satchels. Etcher Labs' larger art satchels can hold quite a bit of supplies. They have different pockets that you can put things into, and then they usually have a rigid section that can use Velcro different doodads to hold brushes, pens, and pencils in. You can buy different pieces that can hold this down, but different bags come with different mechanisms for holding them, and they can even hold a sketchbook down inside of it so it can be used on the road as a drawing tool like this, and it can close up really nicely. They all have different mechanisms for holding them up while you're standing, so you can actually use these to draw and paint while you stand. So this is the larger Etcher Labs satchel, art satchel. It has a stiff backing here that will allow you to put a sketchbook into, and a lot of holders for a huge variety of art materials here. And you can configure the strap so that you can draw with it this way. This can either set up there or be folded down. Unhooking this and it'll fold under the backside and hold up underneath. But it has a nice surface and you can draw while standing, which is a really cool thing. It also has a tripod mount on the back. Oops, dropped something there. It has a tripod mount on the back, which I'll show you in a second. This is a large Etcher Lab satchel mounted on a tripod. This is just an ancient photography tripod that I had around. And a better option is to have one of the quick releases, such as made by Manfrotto or Swiss Arca. But in this way, it just screws onto the tripod like this, has room to put your art journal or sketchbook. It has nice little tool holders that Velcro into this space, and then it has a lot of bag sections that you can put a lot of other art materials in. So, and then it all compacts down into a nice little satchel that you can sling over your shoulder. So this is a great travel option. A smaller, cheaper, and less tricked out version of a case like the Etcher Labs is going to be offered by Artist Toolkit. They offer a couple different sizes of their little bag, and they're a nice size with several pockets that can hold pens and brushes, and you can throw some different size journals into them. They zip up. They have these little holders here that you can put a strap on, and they can be nice, and the smaller size is very similar. So artist toolkits, these are their offerings, and their little small palettes that I showed you earlier fit really nicely into these little bags. And another good option is Art Bin. They've been making a variety of art toolboxes for a long time. They have a lot of different sizes. They're really good for a road trip kind of option where you're trying to get a fair amount of materials to go with it. But if you're oils or acrylics, or you just want to bring a lot of art supplies, that may be an option for you. For plane travel, they may have some options, but it might not be quite as good. They actually have options to go all the way down to kind of roller cases. So if you're really needing to bring all your art supplies, Art Bin's the way to go. And then finally, if you go down to a good art supply store, they're going to have a plethora of options to give you for managing and traveling with your art supplies. Okay, we're getting into the oil and acrylics section. So if you're ambitious enough and want to do acrylics or oils on the road, there are some options for you. I want to start out by making sure that you think about these mediums and what you'll have to deal with traveling with them, especially on planes. Rules changed, and some countries may have different rules. I've honestly flown with oils packed into my checked bags, but I've never ventured to actually take solvents on a plane. Do your homework and decide if you actually can take these items onto a plane with you. Two things to keep in mind. If security takes it, you'll probably never get it back. One option they may consider is that many places that you may be traveling to will probably have an art supply store and can maybe sell small versions of different kinds of solvents or different kinds of mediums. And these smaller items, you might be able to buy them there, use them while you're there, and then find a nice home for them before you leave. So that might be an option, but do your homework on these, because taking them on a plane probably will not happen. If you're doing road trips, you might do that. The only downside of these is they are kind of messy, they are flammable, they have odors that aren't very good for you, so you don't always have the best painting circumstances unless you're painting outside and le plein air, so which we'll be talking about more. Okay, so if you are going to paint on the road with oils and acrylics, you might consider a pochade box, which is just a fancy French name for a paint box, easel combination. Pochade is French for pocket, and from what I understand, these were started by artists taking cigar boxes. Now, I don't smoke cigars, but they would take a cigar box and make a little painting box out of these. And you actually can get these guys in, you go to a cigar shop and they'll often sell you these boxes fairly inexpensively, and they're often wood, and sometimes they're a little abused, but you could do that if you're so inclined. Many companies now make wonderful and functional pochade boxes. They're specifically designed for oil, acrylic, and even watercolor painters. They often have an easel, storage, palette, or a place for a palette, and other features. Most of them are designed to mount onto a photography tripod and have their own or have their own system of support. One of the coolest and smallest is the New Wave Yugo. This is about as minimalistic as you can get. They're not too much thicker than a book. And although this is their larger size, they have a smaller size of this. Okay, so I have the New Wave Yugo palette. It's their larger size, mounted on again, that cheap tripod that I was using earlier. It has a panel in it, and their system uses magnets to hold these two panel holders, and it holds that panel really, really secure. Again, it has the ability to deal with some pretty large panels with the system that's in there. The palette is, I believe it's plexiglass. It can be pulled out to be cleaned. Again, a lot of great use of magnets. And then I've included the little slide brush holder that can go on the side. Again, it uses magnets to hold this little piece onto the bottom, clips on there, and then uses a magnet to clip onto there. So it's very handy. It can fit into a really small spot. I think this is one of the slimmest, sexiest pochade boxes around. Of course, you'd probably need something to keep your paints in or something like that that would carry with it, but it's small enough that it would fit in with those and would work really well. This again is the larger version of this. Another of the long-term facade box makers is Gorilla, and they offer a line of boxes that have a lot of features. They have quite a few different sizes, and each of these have a lot of different features to them, and they're very DIY in their construction. They have these are all optional things that can happen. It has a slide out tray. My whole desk is going to fall apart. Be brushes, paint, a palette, and then in here you can put panels. So this is a good option. These are generally fairly well priced for what they offer, and they do like the other ones. They have a lot of options that they sell to be able to expand this out. You can actually. It has a strap, or you can put a strap on it, and down under here you can see it. There's a tripod mount for it. So this will go onto a photography tripod. Gorilla sells a very light one that does okay, but you might find some or even own a tripod that works really well. So this is a really good box. It can get a lot of stuff in there for you to be able to get out and paint en plein air and with oils or acrylics. And then there's Jack Ritchieson sells their Sienna line of palettes that have a lot of different functionality. Much like the Gorilla box, they're similar size. They just give different arrangements for the way they manage to get their stuff into it. Here we have Jack Ritchison's Sienna line of facade boxes. This is one of their larger, more full-featured ones. It has a lot of great features with this. This is where you'd put a palette, and you could put something like a Stay Wet palette there, and there's generally room for that. You just have to watch how the easel sets down, or if you have a wet canvas in that. Underneath that is storage area where you can put brushes and paints and so forth. It has this option, or this side carrier that sits out that will hold brushes or mediums or containers for turpenoid or something like that. This is for a roll of paper towels. And then this particular unit also has a wet canvas or wet panel holder here that can fit a few different types of wet panels in it. And then you'll notice that this is a traditional easel kind of setup and will allow you to adjust the height of where your piece works. This will hold a stretched canvas also. It is a pretty standard easel construction, so it will do that. And it folds down to be a fairly reasonable size to be able to travel with. Like this. I have to take a few things off, but it will all fold down into this small box. So Sienna is a nice one. This has a nicer finish than the Gorilla. Price-wise, I don't really know which way they go, but they each have different features, so I would compare either of them if you're looking for someone with this. Both Sienna and Gorilla have smaller boxes than I showed, and I think this might be the largest in the Sienna line that I'm aware of at the moment. A lot of nice little features, and again, what a lot of artists do is they'll get something like this, and they'll modify it to meet their needs. And the one nice thing about the Gorilla box is it's all about modification. The Sienna is a little bit more grab and go. They kind of set this thing up with everything you might need on the go. You just need to figure out their system and work with that. So both offer some really nice options. If you're looking for a little bit more of a classical easel, Craft Geek makes a really cool easel system right now. Again, this Craft Geek easel is a really nice compact easel. Hardly even tell it's an easel when it's like this. It has a fairly simple way of folding out. This gets it to this size. But then these just turn and flip out like this. And this can set like that, and you have places here that can hold the different things, and then this can go up, and there's a lock for this in the back. So really nice easel, compact, super easy to pick up and take down. Great option. this thing is really great. It's nice, lightweight, folds up to be really small, and can travel very easily. So for a traditional easel, this is great. There are definitely a lot of less expensive easels that are lighter weight than this are, but my experience is they're not very stable. This is a very nice classic easel that you can use on the road, and it is nearly full size, and it goes into almost no space. So this is a fairly new offering by Craft Geek, and I have a link to them, an affiliate link in the show notes below. So this is also an option for classical easels. Also another option, Soltech makes a really popular, small, and really cool option for painting oils and acrylics, un plein air, that is on the higher end side. Every artist I know has one of these, loves them. They're really quite great. They are a little bit pricey, but they hold up really well, and they're really great for fulfilling their option. What they are is they're basically a modern take on the classic French easel. The classic French easel is another option, and that comes in a half size or full size easel that also has a place for a palette and materials, folds up, can be carried with a strap. Also, these are usually well priced. Unfortunately, these easels can be a little janky. They take a skill set to be able to assemble them, and if they're not a high quality one, they can be pretty rickety. So look at those, see if that's an option for you. They're definitely designed for a right brain, left brain kind of artist that can deal with the complexities of the system. They've been used for years, but there, in my opinion, are better offers out there that I've shown you with the pochade boxes and so forth. So while we're speaking of painting en plein air outside, especially for those that are wanting to paint with acrylics or acrylic gouache, often outside temperatures, sun, and airflow can dry these paints out on the canvas and on the palette extremely fast. One technique that you will want to get into is having a spritz bottle and spritzing your paints regularly. It's just kind of one of these things that every like 3 or 4 minutes you should grab your spray bottle, spray off your paints, keep them moist. Otherwise they'll dry on your palette and you're going to waste a lot of nice paint. Another consideration for this is you might want to consider buying a retardant to mix with your paints. This will slow down the dry time so that you'll get a little bit more life out of them on the palette or even on the canvas as you're using them. Or you can buy a paint that has those extenders in the paint from manufacturing. Golden Open is an example of this. They put a retardant in with the paint so you have a longer drying time, and this can really save you in warm, dry climates when you're painting outside. If you're painting in oils, but this also applies with acrylics and other paints that you might be painting with on the go, you have some other considerations you might want to consider. First, you'll probably want some way of protecting your palette and the paint on your palette as you travel. For watercolor, this is easy. It just dries and it stays in the palette. But for acrylic painters or oil painters, you might need to get a sealed palette that can hold your paint in, such as this Masterson Stay Wet line. So this line has a sealed compartment that then allows you to have a palette inside that you can put your paints on, and it gives you plenty of room to have paint in there that will protect it and not allow it to dry. For acrylic painters, there's a sponge that's inside. You dampen this and it keeps the inside moisture very high, so your acrylics will last much longer in this palette when it's sealed than you would in other cases. Recently, Masterson was taken over by New Wave, which we talked about their Yugo pochade box. They've been making several lines of their palettes, including the Easy View palette and their very sexy Posh glass palette, and they're now making those that fit into the Masterson Stay Wet palettes. Now this is their smallest one. This is a great travel size one, but they actually make much larger ones that will work with oils or acrylics. So you might consider a Stay Wet palette. If you're working in gouache or others, there's some options that hold gouache, and some of them will keep the gouache from drying out. They're sealed also and have little compartments, but there's a lot of offerings. Yet I do recommend the Masterson as an option for oil or acrylic painters. Another challenge you'll have to consider is what do you do with the paintings when you've completed? For oils, and less so acrylics, the painting may not be dry when you're ready to leave. Some pochade boxes, as we saw, can hold wet panels in them, sometimes within the easel, or they might have a second compartment for them. But if you're painting in oil and you're on a long session, you may end up having to transport a handful of wet paintings as you travel. I have seen some ingenious DIY solutions involving pizza boxes, but you might want to look at some of these options instead. One thing to be aware of with these is most of these have a limited size or the number of surfaces they can handle. They're generally around panels opposed to stretched canvases, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So consider those things before you buy. New Wave, again, has offered a great solution with their U-Go wet panel carriers. These come in 2 different sizes. They're rugged, and you can adjust them with a rail system to allow you to handle different size panels within them. Raymar has been making a very lightweight wet panel carrier for a while. They too have a rail system, and they handle different sizes also. So there's another one you might consider. Jack Richardson with their Sienna line, similar to that pochade box, they sell a wood wet panel holder also. Jackson's also makes one that handle their canvas panels. All of these brings us to yet another point. Space is limited. If you're painting, what is a good thing to paint on? Traditional stretch canvases take up a fair amount of room, and although there are some carriers that are designed to carry wet stretch canvases, they often don't protect them very well. So for the oil or acrylic painter, there are a few different options. It used to be that the canvas panel were those cheap practice panels that were the solution for students, but nowadays there's pro-level canvas panels that have a high-quality canvas that's put onto different types of surfaces. You can also get a variety of gessoed MDF or basswood panels with different levels of tooth and smoothness that are by companies like Ampersand. I personally like the rigidity and smoothness of a panel, but that is just me. But they end up being even more important because of the space limitation. And believe it or not, several companies make papers that are designed to handle painting in both oils or acrylics directly onto paper. These include Legion, Strathmore, Canson, and Arches. Fredericks even sells pads of real canvas that you may be able to use if you want to go that way. You can also gesso the pages in your sketchbook or journal and then paint in oils and acrylics in that. Yes, I have seen people painting in oils in a journal. I have not done this. I assume you would have to paint very lean and very thin so that it will dry in some reasonable amount of time. I might also suggest you bring a little bit of glassine and use that between your pages. I have not done that. I have seen it. Acrylics, you can do that all day long. Works really good. By gessoing the page, you get a nicer surface to paint on. You get more of a painterly-like fill onto the paper, unless you're using one of those previously mentioned oil and acrylic papers that are designed specifically for those mediums. And then a final thing to consider, if you're traveling on the road, nowadays there's a lot of oil paints that are water miscible, meaning that you can clean with water, you can thin with water. You really don't need to use solvents with these paints. Back in the day, this was kind of a student grade option, but with companies like Talon's coming out with their Cobra line, this is a professional, high pigmented, quality oil paint that is water clean upable. This really can be helpful on the road. It allows you to travel without the solvents that we were talking about earlier. It's nice to have a medium with this. They make a water miscible medium that comes with this. Now the trick here is a lot of people have a lot of questions about these, and they're basically what they do is they take the oil molecule, such as linseed oil that this is based on, and then they encapsulate that into another product. And when you paint with that product that encapsulates those oil molecules then evaporates out and leaves you with oil paints. Their dry time, their quality, their look is going to be oil paint. You're painting with an oil paint. It's just that it has a product in there that allows it to work with water instead of solvents. So this is a great option when you travel. I actually know some pro-level artists that have switched over into using these completely, even in their studio, just because they're trying to get rid of the hazardous solvents that cause so much problem. They're flammable, their odors can be unhealthy for people. So water-soluble oil paints are a great option, or water-miscible oil paints. Again, Talons makes their Cobra line. Holbein makes their line, which is eluding me, but Holbein has a water miscible oil. And then Winsor Newton has a student grade. Their Artisan line is a water miscible student grade, maybe a little bit more affordable, but you're going to get a little higher quality with one of these two other options. I have one thing to put in here while we're talking about traveling and oil painting and so forth. If you're painting in oils and on the go and you like mini stuff, you might like this book by Remington Robinson. It's Mini Plein Air Painting, and he paints all his works in a Altoids can for oils. And it's a whole book on how to do that and his process and the way he does that. So again, Mini Plein Air Painting by Remington Robinson. There'll be a link below, but this might be the perfect book for you for your next trip. So here's another idea for you. It's actually an idea that comes from my time at Burning Man. If you're going to make art while you're on the road, think about bringing a small watercolor block or pad and make some of your work in that, and then take them out and gift them to the people you meet while you travel. It is a great way to make friends and draw attention to your larger portfolio of work, your social media, or the things that you do. You can have a stamp that made or write your contact information on the back of each painting, so as you pass it out, they'll be able to get back a hold of you. It is kind of like a handmade business card. People love art, and a gift of art goes a long way. As I have alluded to, you can take the sketchbook concept beyond just a sketchbook and make an actual travel journal on your trip. This can be with the intention of having a final result that you would share with your friends. You can do this by combining art, writing, and memorabilia that can be glued in during your trip. Doing this in a nice book-bound sketchbook like I've been showing you, or art journal, with mixed media paper or watercolor paper, will make a really nice keepsake. To glue things into your sketchbook, one of the best glues that you can get is an acrylic matte medium. It dries relatively quick, it dries clear, it is flexible, and if you use the matte, it has a matte finish that looks almost just like the paper. It also will last a really long time. On the cheaper side, you could use Mod Podge, although some people complain that it does yellow a little bit. More expensive mediums like the Golden or Liquitex work really nice, and they come into the different surface qualities such as glossy or satin and matte. And they're, again, a great glue. You can put it under or over the things that you glue into your travel journal. For air travel, you might want to decant a little of that into a pill bottle so you don't get it sideways with the security. You might also need to take a cheap brush with you. You can actually use a foam brush with these acrylic mediums. So I believe that making art on the road has a lot of value. Many have stated that drawing or painting a scene that you experience while you travel will lock that experience into your head better than just about anything else, including taking a photograph. Another thing to keep in mind, if you're traveling with non-artists, as I kind of warned you about earlier, it would be necessary to work on your speed and communicate your intent with your group and try to hold to those expressed time schedules. If you don't, you may find the patience for your future sessions a little thin. So communication really is the key there. I do like to take a photo before I start a drawing so that I have a reference point so I can continue the session later if I don't finish, which I usually do because I'm a little bit slow. Yet doing these things will teach you to render rapidly, which further teaches you how to identify the important elements, set up your composition, concentrate your efforts on and detail on your subject, all of which are really good skills to have. If you're going on a trip of a lifetime and art is going to be in the mix, you may want to practice a bit before you leave. Work out your routine, make sure all your supplies and tools are working the way you want them to work, make sure you're working with everything in an efficient process. One thing I like to do when I travel is hit art museums. Keep in mind that a lot of art museums will allow you to paint or draw in the museum. Check with them first, but doing a master study from an original painting is kind of an amazing thing. This is a really big topic. I've just hit the tip of the iceberg. Hopefully, I've given you a lot of ideas on the way you can improve your art making while you're traveling. If you have any products, techniques, or tips, please share them in the comments below. We're getting a lot of interaction in the comments section, and you'll be helping out other artists. If you like this content and want to get more We Talk Art in your feed, please hit the subscribe button. That and the like button really helps out the channel a lot. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the comments section. I'll put 2 other We Talk Art videos up on the screen in a moment that you can click on. Otherwise, go make some art.